There's no other way to do this but to dive. I really should have tested that first. Am I just floating now? Am I must be right on the edge still. Okay. Let's just... There we go. So you probably can't see too well at the moment. We're at the absolute bottom of the world. And this is, of course, the 1.17 betas, so it means that we've got the extra depth and the extra sky limit. Now, these vertical farms, they used to be popular back in the day, but a long time ago, they sort of started to phase out of popularity because there was much easier ways to do things with flying machines. But my question is that now that we've got this extra height, these kind of farms have become extra useful again. And not only that, but we can also use flying machines for these kind of farms. So let's give this one a little bit of a test. And now you should notice that we've got RTX off. So what we need to do is go through how this is all built and how you can make something like this in a survival world. So the machine is actually a lot more simple than obviously it probably looked in RTX. I know you guys probably... I just killed that one, didn't I? So I know you guys are probably not used to looking at things in RTX, and it can make it a bit more difficult. So what we're going to do is we're going to break down this kind of farm, and we're basically going to go through the different sort of things that we've got to do in order to actually make something like this. What we might do is we might just give that a little bit of space, because we don't need to build another one that tall. We can build it a lot more smaller, and it'll basically be the same thing. So we'll just go on the other side of the Insta volcano. And what we'll do is we'll build it pretty much just on the ground over here. So what we're going to start with is just the basic sort of shaft areas. So these are basically duplicated over and over and over again. So what we're going to do is I'm going to just use iron blocks just because it comes up on videos a little bit easier to see. And what we can do is something a little bit like this. So we're going to grab our dirt blocks along here. We're going to grab some of our iron blocks along here. And that should pretty much do it for the main sort of section. So as you can sort of see, what we have here is basically our grass area. So we would have a melon or pumpkin on each side. And then in the middle, we'll actually have our pumpkins and melons actually growing. Now, the problem with this design is that generally, ideally, you'd actually want to have grass all the way around, because it gives it the most likelihood of growing a pumpkin or a melon or something like that. Unfortunately, that's a downside to this design. At the same point, it means that basically you do actually fit everything inside a chunk, so you can't actually fit everything inside a couple chunks that are constantly loaded, so that's something to keep in mind. There's a bit of a trade-off with things. There's always going to be a trade-off when it comes to Minecraft farms, and that's this one, unfortunately. But what we're going to do is we're going to go underneath it now, and we're just going to do the same basic sort of design there. And this time what we're going to do is put a signpost here, another one just there, and then two more like that. And then just up on this level, we're going to put two more. So it uses quite a bit of signposts, but if we chuck in some water, you'll see, but the basic idea is that once a piston comes up and pushes it along, it will basically either push it straight through, or it'll basically push it towards the edge here, where it'll just fall all the way down to the bottom. So quite simple sort of concept, but it leaves open a few different interesting points, because the pistons go up with the flying machine, you see. And at the same point, what that means is that we actually get, at some stages, pistons that are sitting right. Come on. Why? There we go. You get pistons that are sitting here. Now, if you engage it while it's sitting there, that's a problem. So you can't just power this thing with an observer and hope for the best, because it's going to basically break everything. What we need to do in this case is we need to make sure that the flying machine is actually only ever powering this piston when it's in line with here. So the way that I've solved this is by adding a little bit of a circuit. So you may have seen that there was these sticking out sort of sections here with a repeater and some redstone. The reason why that occurs is because what we have is an actual observer that's sitting right here. And then basically once the observer actually hits that redstone dust, it's going to engage that piston. If the piston is actually one block lower, kind of like this, you'll notice that it won't actually engage. So the idea behind this is that it'll only engage whenever the piston's actually lined up with this repeater, which is a really good design. It really comes in handy. The only downside with this is because we've built them so compact and we generally have another farm just over here on this side, it means that it gets quite tricky as far as having the timing together goes. So I would have something like this where there's another repeater. So here's one of the realities of Minecraft, is that Bedrock is fantastic for many different things, but setting flying machines off at the exact same time and having that repeat over and over again is not always the best. Which is why you saw one of the flying machines was much more in front of the other one, and then that's much more in front of the other one down from there. The reason for that is just because this machine is built fairly close together to try and keep it all tight and compact, and the problem with that being is that they could possibly interfere with each other if you set them off at the same time. And again, you probably would have noticed that the same sort of circuit, kind of like this, would have existed on the other side. And the reason for that is, again, just so that it can fire another piston that's in line with this one. So basically from here, once you understand that very simple sort of design, just basically rinse and repeat, you just basically stack one on top of each other until you get quite a lot that look a little bit like this. So as you can see, it's just basically the exact same circuit. It's all just built stacked on top of each other. It's trying to minimize the amount of space that it's using as much as possible. And that's why you're seeing one flying machine ahead of all the rest, and then the next one, then the next one. Is that we're just coming really close to the timing on this actual circuit here, and we just want to make sure that it doesn't interfere from one column to another. What we have here is a basic return to sender circuit. So what will happen is that we have an observer that will pick up on one of the blocks. Don't detect pistons or observers because that's not very good. If you have to add some sort of extra random block on top, like I have, like you'll notice that there's a few extra glass pieces and things like that, I'm detecting one of the glass pieces, not one of the observers or the pistons, because you don't want that. So what will happen is that once the flying machine gets up to the very top here, what will happen is that we've got obviously some repeaters that delay the circuit. These delays can be very useful. You want a little bit of a delay, otherwise if you're a bit too fast, sometimes it does break the whole thing. And as you can see over here, I'm just activating it with a bell. And the bells are quite useful for actually doing it in Minecraft because basically you're really running an observer off them. So you really want something that you can just basically have a block come into line, give a bit of delay, and then activate the bell. So these work really fantastic. It's mainly about lining up where the flying machine sort of comes into the whole device though. Aside from that, it's fairly basic. You can change the design as much as you want though. I will mention two things. First of all, that if you're playing up to pretty much the sky limits, you probably want to add a few torches because it seems like we're now getting snow once you hit past a certain height. So these torches will basically keep these top blocks from actually becoming ice, and all the rest should be pretty much fine because they're underneath something which is actually water. So all perfectly fine from there. So the other thing is that if you're currently playing in the betas, like I am, you might notice that the current version is having a little bit of an issue where the sticky pistons aren't exactly operating entirely 100% correct at the very height limit of 320 blocks. So it's best to build these things down a little bit lower than the absolute sky limit, which I've had to do, just because obviously that there's that as an issue apparently at the moment where sticky pistons don't stick at the height limit. It'll get fixed at some point, but yeah, very strange. There you go. We've finally got block dropping in Minecraft Bedrock Edition. There you go. That's the one thing that everyone's wanted. Now, what we have down here is the actual flying machines. So I'll show you in a moment how I actually build these flying machines and what you can do to sort of make them. But the other thing I need to show you first is just the delays that we have at the back here. So as you can see, it's just detecting one of the blocks that's stuck onto the actual flying machine with an observer, running it through some delays. I'd probably add more repeaters than this, or a more greater delay, you do actually want a bit of a gap between them. It would be good to have a bit more of a gap with this machine. So as you can see, this flying machine will set off this one, which powers a bell again over here. And then as we go back to it, you'll find that this one powers this one powers this one powers this one, so on and so forth, until we get down to here, where I've got a very simple T flip-flop, which is using... Did I use a redstone block? Yeah, I did. So as you can see, a redstone block carries a line all the way back down to the very starting one, and then we're off to the races again. The reason why there's an observer here is basically so I can turn off the machine using this sticky piston line. Ignore the chests because they're not important. And wherever the line goes, over here, and back to the original switch. So the way that it works is that once I pull this, you'll find that this observer will actually, wherever it is, where's the observer? Where is the observer? Nope, that's the wrong section. Here we go. The observer will basically shift back over, and because it's shifted over, it means that it actually engages an automatic pulse. But it's generally sort of basic sort of stuff. It's not too bad as far as complexity goes. So let's have a look at the actual flying machine, then it will make a lot more sense about how this all sort of works. Okay, so for these flying machines, you want a very basic L sort of shape, as you can see. Then you're going to have a sticky piston on top of that one. You're going to have a sticky piston facing downwards. And then on top, you can do it with slime or honey, it's up to you. You basically just want to make that kind of shape. It doesn't really matter. I'm just using slime and honey just so that you can see the two different halves of this flying machine. So the next thing that we're going to do from here is we're going to grab an observer, face it outwards like that, so the face is on the outside. And same with this one, so the face is on this outside. Now from here, what we will do is basically put a sticky piston facing upwards and another observer facing outwards, as you can see. And on this side, what we'll do is we'll have a sticky piston facing downwards and a observer facing outwards, kind of like that. So this is a very sort of technical two-way flying machine. It does work in Bedrock. It's just a bit sort of unusual and a bit strange. But it allows us in this case to make something fairly sort of simple that can basically do our job for us. So how you engage and disengage this machine is, for instance, if we wanted to make it go flying upwards, we want to activate this observer right here. So if I was to grab something like a redstone torch or just a normal torch, let's not complicate things too much. Let's just grab a normal torch and I chuck it on here. As you can see, it flies up nice and easy, makes lots of noise. It's not the most lag friendly flying machine, unfortunately, but it is a fairly sort of simple two-way flying machine that doesn't require too much resources. I'm going to use that with a bit of a grain of salt there. It's not the cheapest thing, but it works. And if you want it to fly back down, just basically activate that observer right there, and it will fly back down. Now, in current betas, pistons and things like that can be a little bit sketchy. It is betas, remember, so you know it's not like things are perfect. They're not claiming for things to be perfect, so just keep that in mind. But it should work in any regular version of Minecraft or 1.17 once it's released. So from here, what we need to do though is we need to add this flying machine to fly up through here, and we also need to add in some pistons and observers to basically power this circuit. So how this would work in the real world is we basically put a piston here, and this time we put an observer facing inwards. So just like that. And we can do the same thing on the other side, where we just get a piston facing like that, and an observer facing inwards. So as this observer right here comes in contact with that redstone right there, then what will happen is it will run the redstone signal into the repeater, and it should hit that piston right there. Very, very strange. It's kind of a half flying machine circuit, but it's definitely an unusual one, I will say. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly reconstruct this machine right here so that you can see exactly where it goes. So to start off with, we want an observer, we want a sticky piston, not sticky piston. We want 2 slime blocks and 1 down the bottom, kind of. Next we want 2 slime blocks and 1 down the bottom here. We have the observer facing outwards. We have your piston that's going to be facing upwards, another observer facing outwards, and a piston just sitting here. Then for the other half, we can just basically grab a piston facing downwards, grab the 3 blocks that we need, observer facing outwards again, then we'll grab ourselves a sticky piston, grab ourselves an observer facing outwards, and then what we need to do is we need to do the piston for the other side. So we'll have one piston that's basically working here, and the other one works here, which means that we need an observer facing outwards. So as you can see, quite strange, but it does work. What it will mean is that, as you can see, once the observer comes, nope, that observer needs to be facing the other way, like that. Once the observer comes in contact with this line here, it'll basically power it, and then the repeater will only allow it as long as that piston is in that position. So let's see this work in action. So what we'll do is I'm just going to create a line very quickly down here, and then we're just going to get rid of those blocks, and let's activate it. So as you can see, it only activated once it actually came in contact with that circuit right there. So I'll run it back the other way so that you can see a little bit better. There you go. And there's 2. And I probably should stop that. Okay, so as you can see, definitely all works, and it's a weird one. It is a strange one. I've never really thought about actually using the flying machines as part of a redstone circuit, but it works. It relieves a lot of the requirements for what vertical machines would actually have, which was kind of their downfall in the past, was the very high requirements of redstone components, where this is still using repeaters. There's probably no way to get around it other than just using observers, which is probably just as expensive anyway. But a couple of repeaters isn't really the worst thing in the world. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this as a download in the description below. And what you can do is basically have a look through it, and hopefully it doesn't crash. I know the betas are a little bit more unstable at the moment. Small catch with this is that unless you're in the betas, you won't be able to actually open this until you're in 1.17. So just keep that in mind when you go to open it, and if you wonder why it's not opening, you've probably not either updated or the update's probably just not out yet. So I hope you guys enjoy the video, and I'll catch you as always in the next one, and I'll play that last reel again just because it looks so darn cool. Catch you guys.